All right, so we're here with the VanDeKoppels. Erin is our counselor from Fox Hill, and do you want to introduce your wife, Erin?
Yeah, it's my wife, Melinda.
Hi, I'm
Hi,
also a
Melinda.
therapist. I'm in private practice in Andover.
Great. Well, I was really excited to hear the background. I knew Erin's background, and especially with everything that's going on, I know there's a lot of people have anxiety, people that maybe typically don't feel anxiety are dealing with anxiety right now. I know I am. So just to jump right in, what do you tell people, in these days where there's, again, I talked to Erin a little bit via email and talk about our current normal is something none of us are really used to. So what are some starting points for people just to stay kind of in a good place mentally?
Want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think there's a few things probably. I mean, everyone's heard sort of the typical follow a routine, stay on a schedule, self-care, all that kind of stuff, which is all very important. But to take it a little bit further, I like to tell people to make sure that they're getting in a self-care routine. So not just doing self-care when you're sort of at your wit's end and you can't take it any longer, but to sort of get into the practice of doing something or multiple things every single day. Whether that be something physical or meditation or yoga or whatever it might be that works for you, but getting that into the day-to-day routine. So that's one big thing that I've been telling people. Also, to go more into sticking to a routine, I've been telling people about doing some more specific communication with family members. So making sure that everybody in the household is communicating about where they're at and how they're feeling and what they need, asking for help, all of those sort of things I think are really important during this time. Because our emotions can change day to day as these circumstances keep changing day to day. And I think it's important for family members to be checking in with each other, spouses with each other, parents with kids, just to see where everybody's at. And also coming up with plans about, if the schedule is changing or if there needs to be some flexibility with the schedule or more boundaries or whatever it might be for that particular day. Or if a kid, is having an off day and just can't follow the typical school routine, making sure there's flexibility with that and make sure you're communicating about that. So communication has been huge, I think, hard for a lot of people for sure, but a huge benefit to increase that communication.
Can I ask just one quick follow-up?
Yeah.
The self-care, like I know for myself personally, and I'll take advantage of this individual counseling session.
What are you
So for myself personally, like my self-care routine is, get up early, try to work out early, maybe do a little meditation. But I'm finding like my normal self-care isn't enough right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, one analogy I always use, and I use it a lot even with teachers and with parents, just during a typical school year, is like a balloon with cracks and holes in it. When a balloon isn't full, you're not going to notice those cracks and holes. So now is a time when everyone's balloons are really full, and you notice those things, and a lot of those little things aren't things you would think you wouldn't be focusing on right now, but they still need to be addressed. Like communication is one of them. Like even people with really good communication or really good self-care, you still need to find, figure out a time in your schedule and try things out to see what will work, and start really kind of checking in with yourself in addition to checking with your family. Like Melinda said, is checking with yourself. Like, how did that work? Was that helpful? Do I feel better? Because it's okay to notice that, like, oh, I think I need more, and then go from there.
I know, we talk about with kids a lot of times the social media feeds and how a lot of kids post like their perfect worlds and everybody looks great on social media. But now I think it can be similar for some families that are posting about how they had this great day teaching their kids at home. And I think for me personally in my house, the great days are fewer and far between. They're not like all bad, but they're, that each day has a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. And I think we're still trying to find what works best for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
A lot of people have been listening to obviously a lot more podcasts. I've been hearing a lot of that. I know like the Brene Brown one has popped up a bunch lately, and I've heard of other ones. And people talk about you've mentioned like a marathon. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And then right now it feels like we're in maybe mile 2 or 3, even where you're like, I feel really good. I could probably go for a sprint right now, but you're in a marathon. You have 24 more miles to go. And Brene Brown talked about that adrenaline you feel right away. And you have to still check in and think about that not everything is about the pandemic.
Right.
Having good days and having bad days and trying to do things and making sure not everything is about the pandemic and whether it's news or talking with people, saying hi to people when you email someone. That's a big piece of advice I've given to a lot of even friends, is just have typical conversations. Like just say, hi, good morning. How, hey, what are you doing? Like if you're in the neighborhood with someone, try to make things just not about it. And I've had a lot more days in the past 2 weeks that I pretty much forgot there was this thing going on. I was, not necessarily in vacation mode, and that's okay. I didn't feel guilty about that. Which you have to kind of forgive yourself when you don't feel guilty about it.
No, I think that's a good point. I've noticed if you take a chance to kind of look at what's going on around you, the world is also slowing down in a nice way.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're meeting people in your neighborhood you didn't even know existed, not that you're getting close, but from a distance, having conversations. And I don't know, like, and calling like family members that aren't with you in the same house is happening more, and friends. So there's definitely some nice things happening, that the pace is slowing down from our busy lives. So I don't know if, to your point, Aaron, if people can focus on that a little bit to take some of the positives as well.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like it's okay to focus on that and do other things. And that's part of everyone's routine. Everyone's been talking about routine and schedules. And like Melinda said, like that's, it's good advice, and people, should be definitely following that and doing their best to do that. But also in those routines and schedules, do what you've always done. We still always have Friday pizza night and, our Scrabble games, and we still make bets with each other on our Scrabble games like we've always done for as many years as we've been together. So having those things, like I said, it's okay to forget about it and yeah, move on.
So I'm hearing like from a few families, parents have jobs they have to try to get done during the day, and then they have young children at home with them. And it seems like an impossible ask, I think, in some cases. I don't know how you can manage that. Do you have any advice, like what to do if you're like, I'm stressed because I have to get this done for my job, but I also know the kids are more important to me. So it's almost that balance. It's not fair to like let either one go. I don't know what kind of advice you give people trying to deal with that type of thing.
Some advice I've given a lot of parents and again, a lot of friends, because a lot of our friends have, school age kids. So they've reached out to us too. Some of it's like kind of just a mentality and approach, which is not an easy thing to do. And a crisis is not a time to make like necessarily major behavioral changes, but it can be helpful to have an approach of when you make your schedule and routine, make sure that you have healthy boundaries and do your best to stick to them. Like it's really easy to have everyone has their phone on them, right? Or everyone's on their technology. And it's easy to blur those lines of even when you're at home and you're maybe playing a game or on like, Instagram or whatever you're doing, to an email notification pops up or a colleague texts you. You have to kind of have that approach of like, I'm going to draw a boundary here. And maybe you shift things off, like maybe like I'm doing my work in the morning and Melinda does her work at night. That's typically how we do it. She sees clients at night. And we just have those boundaries. Like at 4:00, like I'm done. I'll only check emails a little bit. So that can be hard to do, but having some sort of healthy boundaries, and it takes practice. It's okay if you like, oh, I really want to answer this one. It is what it is. That's one big piece of advice I've been giving people, is make sure you have healthy boundaries in juggling those things. You kind of mentioned this, I think, a bit ago, and this is like seems like a funny one, but having those routines of like when you get up in the morning, Like the whole first week of this, I pretty much wore pajama pants, and I was in that kind of adrenaline mode. So, but now I get up and I literally do my morning routine as if I was driving to Fox Hill, from the driving. And those subtle things are really helpful. And that is really helpful for the younger kids too, as they pick up on those subtleties, and those subtleties can help us do those normal routines to break up your day mentally, so you're aware of, I'm at work right now, or I'm doing whatever, I'm with the kids right now. And sometimes you have to juggle it. That's okay, but try to make those healthy boundaries for yourself.
And I'll just add in, which I sort of already said before, but that flexibility. So if you're a parent and you're trying to do parenting and being a teacher and keeping your job, something's got to give. You can't do full-time parent and full-time work at the same time. And I've encouraged a lot of parents to remember that, these kids also need our emotional support too, and they need to be heard and they need to be listened. And if your kid is just not a place to do schoolwork that day, to not push it, that you can let it go for a day, that it doesn't have to be perfect every day, because the kids are struggling with this new routine too, just like we are.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So that's a good transition. What do you say to your kids? I know, we deal with kids from preschool to 12 in our district, and maybe I'm sure it's a little different for different age groups, but they're obviously at least feeling the anxiety because we're showing it as adults, even if we try not to. How do we talk to them about this and not add to their fear and try to get them comfortable, living in their current normal situation?
Yeah, a couple things. One is let them, like for the younger kids, maybe second grade below, perhaps. I mean, second grade is a big transitional age, that 8 years old-ish, but kind of 7 years old and below. They're definitely going to deal with it very differently. Letting them kind of lead the way, come to you. It's really hard to do, I think, for a lot of parents, because you just want to help them out and talk to them and see where they're at. But letting them kind of guide the conversation, letting them come to you. It's similar to young kids about that age at a funeral. If you've ever been at a funeral with young kids like that, a lot of times they're running around playing, and that might seem awkward to us, but to them, it's different. They just process it different, and that's okay. So letting them guide it, knowing your own thoughts and feelings about everything is really helpful. Whatever those are, they're all okay. Knowing those, as you're going into those conversations, can be helpful. So you're aware of them, and by modeling that to them, using whatever language you need to say what you're feeling and how you're dealing with things is good for them. So they can see that and model that and talk about their feelings. And don't worry so much about having all the answers. It's okay not to know. Like, we still have this state of uncertainty, like May 4th or more. If kids say, do you know? It's like I say, I don't know, but let's figure out a plan. So a lot of times we have people who have with anxiety, adults, kids of any age, have what ifs in their head. What about this? What if this happens? A lot of times I'll say to kids, well, I don't know, what would you do if that would happen? Let's make a plan together and try that. So it's okay not to have all the answers. Don't worry so much about the exact wording of how you say things. It's more the kids, especially the younger kids, will have more awareness of the emotions and the general message. So don't hung up if you don't have all the right words. I'm sure even if our 8-month-old was 8 years old, I'm sure we would probably still, stumble over our words talking with him, but they get the message more than the words.
Right.
Yeah.
And at what point is it okay for me to tell my child, my youngest right now is 14, but so I feel fine with telling her I'm nervous. I'm scared about some of the unknowns. At what age is it okay to tell a child that? Could I tell a first grader? I'm not really sure, because it's been a while for me having a first grader in the house.
In terms of every child and parent and family is going to be different. It depends on the relationship and developmentally where that child is at. Families definitely use each other for support at all ages. I do think the younger you go, the more you might want to really think like, why am I telling my child this? Like, I mean, I'd probably recommend to most parents not to lean on their 5-year-old for emotional support. I mean, maybe find someone else if you can. Just it might be a heavy burden. But I think the older you go, I think it might depend a bit more on your relationship and their skills. Maybe with teenagers, you might have a better grasp on teenagers.
Yeah. Like you were saying, I think it really depends on where the kid is at emotionally and developmentally, but it's okay to model, the uncertainty and not make up answers or give them certainty when there's not, and we're all in the same position of not really knowing, when it's going to end or what it's going to be like. So it's okay to let them know, we don't know either, but we're going to, support each other along the way. And here's what we're going to do. And just giving them more of those plans, focusing more on that, focusing more on what we can control versus what is out of our control, and reminding kids of all ages, teenagers, adults, everybody of that, not letting our minds wander to the things that are out of our control, when, this is going to be over, when we're going to go back to school, what is next year going to look like, just sort of taking it day by day and focusing on, okay, what are we going to do in the meantime? What can we control in these circumstances is really important for any age. You can teach that to even little kids.
One thing I've learned as I've gotten older is the stuff that goes through my head is probably pretty common, and the stuff that happens in my house is probably pretty common to a lot of houses with a bunch of teenagers going around. So one of the things recently I noticed, so typical, like when we're going to work and coming home, the teenagers in our house tend to gravitate to their rooms after they come home from school, and we have dinner, but then they disappear as quick as we let them. But now we're home for the long haul, and if we're letting them stay in their rooms as much, that same percentage of time they're in the house, I think the adults are feeling lonely to some degree. And the adults aren't getting to go out and interact with the people they interact with. So I don't know if I'm asking a question, I'm making a statement. Like, what do you recommend for, the adults in the house who, now it's like magnified, that typical disconnect you have with your teenagers. And so they don't get lonely and think in your head, like make stories up because you're not talking to these people. Like, how do you recommend we kind of break through to that typical, teenage distance that they exhibit when they're in, late middle school or high school?
I was just going to say that, I think teenagers are going to respond to this in all different ways. And some of them will isolate more, even though they're socially isolated, but they're still going to want to isolate from their parents just because they're teenagers and that's what they want to do. But I would imagine that they still need connection. They're having social media connection and maybe Zoom chats and FaceTime and all that, but they still would benefit from, actual connection with siblings and parents and things. So I would say, have a conversation with them and, do some sort of like problem solving together and compromising together so that they know that you want to have more connection and, not forcing it down their throat, but also coming up with a plan that, some sort of schedule where it's dinner time, we all spend some time together, or lunchtime, or a check-in in the middle of the day, whatever it is that the family comes up with. It doesn't have to be like one specific thing, but if they know what to expect and they know that you're looking for connection with them and that you think it would be good for them to have connection with other people other than just through technology, I think that they will actually appreciate that, even if they scarf at it and don't really seem like they want to.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. Go ahead, Aaron.
I'll say something similar, and I hope I'm not just being redundant, but I mean, even something I said earlier about making, routines and schedules and all that. I mean, as well as not making everything about, the pandemic and connection, all that. Sometimes just making those general, like family plans, whether it was something you used to do or maybe something new. Again, it doesn't have to necessarily be directly for the point of connection or discussion or whatever, because a lot of times those things just come naturally. Again, this depends on everyone's, family dynamics and general personalities and willingness and the desire to have conversations, but maybe make, like family game night or walks, or I know a lot of people have been taking more walks and kid, going on bike rides with, parents and things like that. So sometimes just making activities together around whatever the activity is, that connection will just naturally happen. I don't know if maybe that's begging the question, I guess, but sometimes just if you are looking for more connection, sometimes even for specific reasons, maybe making connections for other reasons, those other things will naturally get solved in a way, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
Yeah.
And the last kind of question I have is, I've been noticing, like with a few people that I'm trying to connect with, it's better for me to try to do it earlier in the day rather than later in the day, because anxiety could be heightened, or people are just fatigued at the end of the day. I don't know if from your experience that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. Over all the years I've been doing this, hands down, whenever I'm working with parents, even with just typical things that come up, it usually comes up at nighttime with kids. And I feel like just talking with a lot of his friends and family, a lot of times nighttime is a time that anxieties are generally heightened. I mean, my guess is just that the day's done, and so you're kind of winding down and your mind's a little more free to wander. So some of that's just personal, like whatever. Know yourself, check in with yourself again, like Melinda said, and like I would say as well, as not just checking with your family, but checking in with yourself, knowing, just taking kind of mental notes like, oh yeah, like, I'm most productive at this time. I think we all do some of that naturally. Like we all know, like maybe in college when we wrote papers the best or whatever. I think maybe kind of doing something similar, just check in with yourself when that works, and take note of it, and then change it up. Try a couple different times. I think that's okay. We don't always have to get it right the first time. Like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And part of figuring out, our current normal is what works and what doesn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know some people are worried about kids missing out on their schooling, but I try to remind a few parents I've talked to, like everybody is in the same boat right now. We're providing some structure. If they need more stuff, we can provide it. But honestly, the priority for me is not education right now. It's making sure everybody's feeling good and adjusting. If they're like in a good place and they need more work, like I'm sure their teacher can get them more resources. But I don't think that's the case for a lot of people right now, that they want more schoolwork. And I think parents might be more stressed than kids about that.
Yeah. And I actually, a lot of teachers and everyone just wants the best. And that's a real positive that like, it's that double-edged sword. It's like everyone's so caring and wants the best, like all the teachers and the parents, obviously. But all the resources are out there. That will happen, I think, especially being like a counselor. I mean, blame on the day job. I think kids, social emotional health comes before academic. That's just me.
All the time, right?
But I do think that philosophy holds for this time. I think more so than other times even, is that we all have to be kind of use our coping skills and be, regulated, and that goes up and down, both for us as well as kids. So yeah, the academics will come, and I like that you said that, is we're all in the same boat, and not just like in Fox Hill, in Burlington, in Mass. I mean, the entire world just about is in the exact same position. So, which I think is in some sense, I think could be comforting.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the last thing, just to change momentum a little bit, I've been asking people, because I do think it's easy to get caught up in like all the things we're missing out on right now, and all the losses we have from our routines. But some of the things we've added, like some sources of gratitude. So what are some of the things that, you feel grateful for that's come about because of this whole situation we're in?
Yeah, I'll start.
Sure. I was thinking about this the other day because I've been seeing my clients from home through telehealth. And so I'll go upstairs and get a snack or, check in with Erin, and I'm able to give my son a little hug and a kiss and say hello throughout the day, which I never was able to do.
I don't get hugs or kisses. Just the baby.
Just the baby. So that's been really nice, just to have that extra time and just extra family time in general, which I know for a lot of families is hard depending on, you know, everybody trying to work and the kids being home all the time. But if you can reframe it and just be grateful to have that extra time, and take the pressure off yourself to do all the schoolwork, I think people can see more of that gratefulness in having more family time. So that's been probably the biggest one for me. I'm also very grateful for technology, just our ability to be able to connect during this time, because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. So it's a great time to use technology in a healthy way and be able to connect with family and friends and colleagues and all of that. So I'm really glad that we're able to do that during this time.
Yeah. I think I'm grateful for, it's interesting. Like, I think of some of the things that we, and a lot of people have talked about this too, and about the things that we've kind of almost been forced to do that we otherwise wouldn't do. And there's so much positive that's come out of that. In all my check-ins and lunch bunch that I've been doing with students over the weeks, I always, what have you learned that's new? Tell me something cool that you've done. And there's a lot of things that I've been able to personally do being at home, that I've been able to do, just like the reading and more family time, things that I've, been forced to do, but just grateful for the ability to be able to be aware of that and be mindful and, read more and spend more family time. And we had a picnic the other day, which is really cool. And then I like what Mr. David Rosenblatt said. I'm going to steal his too. That just being grateful for, even though we're not at school, like, think about my job. Like, that's so cool. Like, there's definitely days where I think back to, I'm like standing there working with kids and seeing cool things happen. I'm just like, no, I get paid for this. Like, so even though we're not in school, like, just being so grateful to be part of a community, like, Fox Hill and Burlington and just schools in general, like, just really grateful for that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I heard it somewhere else, but I totally agree that our kids are going to remember, like, the things we did during this time. They're not going to remember the things we as adults might be stressed out about. They're going to remember the games that you played and the calls that you made, like all these special things that happened because of this situation. So I would encourage families to, like, find some of those things to that they'll remember and not stress out about schoolwork. And
one of the best pieces of wisdom we got when we were having our son, someone said to us, the days are long and the years are short. And that is so true. Yeah. And I think, and I thought about that the other day when we were chatting, and this situation is exactly the same thing. And I've been telling people to, like, make sure you don't just binge all your Netflix shows. Right. Things out, because the days can blend. Like, it's so easy for the days to blend. And this kind of connects to what you just said, is that, not just the kids, but we'll remember some of these things, remember the bike rides. And I think it's good to space those things out, like, not just daily stuff, but, like, do weekly activities and be grateful for those kind of things, because those will be really meaningful. I mean, like, I watched a lot of Netflix. We did a lot of things, but how to do some big things that are kind of rare, I think that'll help and really add to the fun.
Well, that's a great thing to end on. And I'm grateful because I got to meet another family member, Melinda, tonight. I met Patrick Murphy's wife, Amy. So I'm grateful for these opportunities. I wouldn't have had to meet some of the family members of our Burlington teachers and staff. So thanks so much for taking the time. I know, as a person that used to have little ones, this time is sacred. So I really appreciate you two giving me a few minutes tonight.
No worries. Thank you.
Stay well.
Okay, you too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.